Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're talking about Brad Meltzer's Justice League of America, The Tornado's Path. BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're talking Brad Meltzer's JLA. Now, Brad Meltzer's JLA, there's a lot of history to it. What do you need to know? Well, you'd be like, all right, Brent, this is JLA, Volume 1 of Brad Meltzer's run. What's so important? Well, there's a lot of things going into it. First thing you might want to read, not necessary, but is maybe you want to reread Identity Crisis before you go in here. Basically because that's the introduction of Brad Meltzer into the DCU, his writing style, all that sort of stuff. And this jives really well with that story. I like that story. A lot of people don't nowadays, but I still think it's good. The Tornado's Path, the first 7 issues here, 1 through 7, is a phenomenal book. I really enjoyed reading this again. Another thing you might want to read is Infinite Crisis. And maybe not the whole thing. Maybe you just want to read issue number 1 so that you can read the fall of the Justice League, so to speak, where Bruce and Diana are in the Watchtower that's been destroyed, and they tell each other, well, this is your fault, and, F you and all that. But why is the Watchtower destroyed? Well, for that, you might want to go back to JLA, the old run before this was Justice League of America. You might want to read the Crisis of Conscience storyline, where Bruce finds out that they mind-wiped him after the events of Identity Crisis. This is also where Red Tornado apparently gets destroyed, which has a big deal in this book. And then you have the dissolution of the Justice League with this adventure with the Key, and this falling out with Green Arrow and Batman, all that sort of stuff. So, post-JLA ending, post-Infinite Crisis, post-Identity Crisis, you have in 2007, a resurrection of the Justice League. Now, they had stuff in here that was, doesn't really mention the 52 a lot. This takes place post the 52 series, not the new 52, the relaunch that happens a couple years later. But this is Brad Meltzer, the novelist, coming in to revamp the Justice League, to revive it for a new era, to make it like he has a neoclassical approach. So he grabs Ed Benes, who's a phenomenal artist. I think this was like his big break, so to speak. He'd been on a couple of other books before then. I think most notably that I remember, although I didn't read, Birds of Prey. But I first really took notice of Ed Benes, and probably most people did here in the Justice League of America. You had Michael Turner on covers, which blew up the sales a lot. Michael Turner was still around back then, doing these wonderful, wonderful covers. Even though he wasn't doing interiors, he had a phenomenal impact on this series because he had such great covers, to be fair. So, let's talk about Ed Benes, though. Ed Benes, I think he's a pretty good artist. I really enjoyed his Justice League stuff in here, and this is really when I felt he tried to start his, even though I haven't read a whole bunch of stuff of his before, you could really tell he was trying new things. He was trying these weird angles, like, who in their right mind is going to try a bottom-up angle of the big three's chins? You know what I mean? Like looking down on the bottom of their chin here, as you look at my unshaved neck beard. Only Ed Benes is going to do that, of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. It doesn't quite work as well in this 2-page spread in the trade paperback, but I remember at the time being like, wow, that's a really inventive angle for you to try and show everybody, to look up at them as gods, and then basically put your camera down on the desk and have it take this unflattering picture of them, and then try and put that in a comic book where most comic book artists are trying to have the most flattering angle or something like that. Was pretty inventive at the time back in 2007. So this book, The Tornado's Path, is pretty much how the Justice League comes back together with the help of the Big Three and a mystery involving Red Tornado and his body. Now, this was my big introduction to Red Tornado as a character. I haven't really read a whole bunch of JLA before then. I think I'd read a majority of the Grant Morrison run. By that, or maybe not the majority, but the end of the Grant Morrison run. I'd read the Mark Waid stuff. I'd read everything in this volume with Crisis of Conscience and the dissolution of the JLA, before Identity Crisis, the Watchtower blowing up. I read all that stuff, and Red Tornado really wasn't that present there. So him being the main focus here was kind of fresh and new for me. And so that was a whole lot of fun. There's some other characters introduced in here as like Dr. Impossible. This is the guy, he's basically a Mr. Miracle clone except with different colors. He's supposed to be his brother. I don't really think anybody ever picked up on that thread or explored it if he had another thing. There's another interesting thing here with Solomon Grundy being kind of smart and introducing this idea that every time Grundy comes back to life after he's killed, Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, blah, blah, blah. He has a different personality, and sometimes he's smarter than other times. That was pretty interesting for me, having never explored that, although I don't know that anybody's really used him in that way again. So to see Solomon Grundy dressed in a suit like Lex Luthor going up against the Justice League was a pretty cool thing. You've got Amazo in here fighting Hawkgirl and the rest of the Justice League. That was an awesome scene. Just how the Justice League decides to go after Amazo. They immediately have like a battle plan, and they enact this battle plan. That was really cool to see. But I think the majority of the reason why this book works is because of the character work. Brad Meltzer has so many inner monologues in here that it might seem detrimental, but they really do build the characters. You've got monologues from everybody. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Vixen, and he's doing the 2000s thing of the narrative captions. We're not doing thought balloons, but we're doing these color-coded narrative captions. So the first one appears, and you've kind of got to figure out who it is. Okay, black and gray. Who might that be? All right, that must be Batman. Red and yellow. Who is that? Well, this person's talking about Superman. It's definitely not Batman, so it must be Wonder Woman. Okay, awesome. That was Wonder Woman. Who's the blue and yellow type? Well, that's got to be Superman, Who's the green, or not the green, the flesh, the orange and the, this flesh tone and brown. Who's that, right? That's got to be Vixen, because she's talking about meeting with the Question on a date here in Hub City. And, so you just kind of, those little hints and cues of who's on the page and who they're talking about and who it's colored by gives you the hints and clues as who is talking. So it's not unlike what Jeff Loeb did in Superman Batman. In that run, it's just a little bit more evolved from that. It's like, if you can figure out these two, here's 7 other color variations, and I'm going to let you figure it all out. Black Lightning's got his own, that's blue and yellow. Just a whole gamut. Roy Harper, Arsenal, or Red Arrow, as he's come to be known later in this book, has his own. Black Canary has her own. Hal Jordan is green, obviously, because he's Green Lantern. There's just so many different variations, and gives you so much insight into who these characters are. Specifically the relationship was really touching between Green Arrow, Black Canary, and Roy Harper. There's this moment where they kind of invite him to go on this adventure with the League, and they're saying, we're not calling Ollie, we're calling you. And Ollie will be fine, don't worry about him. But Green Arrow and Black Canary have kind of decided that it's Roy's turn to graduate like Nightwing and step up to the plate. There's a great line in here later on about Roy getting his new costume. And they call it they say something like family name, family business, And it's basically because he's basically wearing a red version of the Green Arrow costume. Can't see it on this cover, it's teeny tiny. But basically, the classic one without the hat. So that's fun. Meltzer's introducing ideas here like Roy Harper and Hawkgirl having the hots for each other, which he follows up on a little bit in the later issues. There's just so much going on, but the way that Meltzer weaves it all in just makes it such a fun story to read. He is a novelist after all. And I don't know if this helps or hurts me in terms of this review and maybe what your opinion is, but I have read 5 or 6 of Meltzer's novels. I've read his whole Culper Ring series. I think they're phenomenal. I've read a couple other ones. I haven't read any of the ones that's co-written, like The President's Shadow, all these assassination plots. I haven't read any of those yet. But I do have them bought on my iBooks or whatever, so I'm looking forward to reading them at some point. But I am a big fan of his writing style, and he is a very thriller chapter writer in terms of the way, if you've ever read a Dan Brown novel, Everything ends on a cliffhanger, and he kind of structures that here with every scene kind of ending on a cliffhanger, so to speak, and every issue ending on a bigger cliffhanger. So everything is building, whether it's from character moments to action beats. And it's just so cool to read that in a comic book the way that you read a thriller, and it's not quite a thriller, but it feels, everything's moving. Nothing feels wasted. I would say the storyline that you might think that isn't, very good is the one with Jefferson Pierce and Black Lightning being part of the team. But that storyline actually does play into everything, and it moves so fast, and he has such an interesting take on Jefferson Pierce and why he's talking to these villains at the beginning of that issue, that you're instantly intrigued because he's pulling on past history. And that's one of the things that Meltzer does, which is why I'm saying you might want to read Identity Crisis. You might want to read Infinite Crisis. You might want to read, the end of the JLA, Volume 9, Crisis of Conscience, and whatever that last one is with Tom Derenick on art. I think, is that Kurt Busiek writing that last story? I can't recall. But anyway, you might want to read that also because he's pulling from all these different past events, not in a way that leaves you confused, but in a way that if you've read all these past storylines, you will be appreciative of the depth of Meltzer's knowledge. And even going as far back to what they call the satellite era, when George Perez was still on the Justice League back in the 70s, I believe, when Red Tornado was originally a member. That's the era he's harkening back to the most, because that's when he was a kid reading Justice League and falling in love with these characters. And there's a little bit of original art in this story to give a little bit of background about Red Tornado. So that's a whole lot of fun. All in all, I gotta say, for as many bad raps as I've heard Brad Meltzer get on Identity Crisis, a story which I do like, this Tornado's Path, I think, is a phenomenal read. It's fun. All you gotta really know, I think, if you don't want to read that other stuff or you can't find it, it's on the DC app if you really want to go look for it, or on Comixology if you really want to go look for it. But if you don't want to do that, all you really know is the League was disbanded and they're trying to put it back together again, kind of like Humpty Dumpty. And you just go from there. And I don't really feel like you're going to be that left out, but there's just so many things he's pulling on that you're going to have a better appreciation of what he's doing if you've read those stories as opposed to coming in cold. But I firmly believe you can, because the way that he references everything, he always provides a little bit of context for you to get that emotional beat, even if you don't remember the actual event itself. Ed Bennett's doing some wonderful things here. He's still got a little bit of cheesecake, but he's got some action. He's doing some new angles in here. His inker, I believe, is Sandra Hope on this book. She's doing a phenomenal job, as always. And you got Alex Sinclair as the colorist, who's been coloring Jim Lee. So you've got this classic DC feel from the last 15 years or so ago. Really, really enjoyed reading these first 7 issues. The main storyline wraps up in issue 6, and then you have this 7th storyline that kind of, establishes the League as a team. And it's got this nice, wonderful 3-page spread. I love these. They're just so fun. They're so kooky. They're so cool. I can't remember which one came first. I remember there was like a battle of the spreads. I feel like this one was in 07, and then you had All-Star Batman and Robin shortly thereafter with its 8-page spread, and then you had Ultimates 2 finally come out from Brian Hitch in Marvel doing an even bigger one. So everybody's trying to one-up themselves on these pull-out spreads. But to see them collected in a trade paperback or deluxe edition, absolute, I think there's one or the other of this out there. But it's well worth the read. Highly recommend The Tornado's Path by Brad Meltzer. Justice League of America. This is volume 1 of the last volume, I guess, or last 2 volumes. But yeah, whole lot of fun. So let me know what you guys think of this volume down below in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.